Annexion Partners. My name is Brandon. Okay, I'm a senior consultant for the construction and engineering space inside Annexion Partners. And with me is Ethan. I believe you see him on the screen as well. He's the director of the Annexion Partners. He will actually be the one that will be responsible for the Q&A session at the end of towards the end of this sort of webinar at the end. So please feel free to just type in questions along the way. You have any, you can also shoot out and send it directly to him. He'll also be the one managing the process, and he will help to filter that out over to Edmund later on. Okay, so as a quick shout out for those who are unfamiliar with us, okay, we are a global headhunting consultancy firm. Okay, we actually specialize in built environment space. We also do the real estate as well as the property and basically the whole project life cycle, right? So the aim of this webinar, right, is really to sort of power possibilities in a sense by connecting all the different stakeholders in our industry through knowledge sharing, empowerment, and just to make sure that everyone can get ahead of the game. Okay, so without further ado, okay, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for today, which is Mr. Edmund Leong. Okay, quick introduction, Edmund. I think we've known each other for a while, but I think for the benefit of the rest of the people, he's currently the head of BIM-VDC in the Straits of construction. Okay, so he actually has a very, very long years of experience in the BIM-VDC space, I believe. Right, so I would say he's actually considered one of the members of the Singapore, I would say the Singapore pioneers, right, when it comes to the BIM space of building and construction, right? He was also a part-time lecturer with the BC Academy, okay, delivering some of the very key BIM construction modules, like the specialist diploma in BIM. He also developed content for the BIM program in the BC Academy. So actually he has stopped doing that and explored to sort of the other interests, such as technology and automation, to sort of further enhance utilization of the BIM content for construction project. Okay, so before he even came into the construction industry, he was already very well informed in the modeling space, I believe, in the GIS and geospatial. Right, I would definitely need to find out a little bit more about that because I didn't hear about that at all. So he was actually in the consultancy space, having a bit of application development, implementation, as well as providing turnkey system integration for the industry. Okay, so Edmund, I believe that I have shared quite a bit of information on you. Okay, I think maybe it's time for you to speak for yourself. I think they would rather hear from you than me.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. I thought I'll probably open up a little bit of a couple of slides, just to give you a bit of insight as to where I probably would see where digitization in the construction industry means or represents today. Now, again, if you are not hearing me very clearly, please raise your hand. This is a big room. I might get a little bit of echo or muffling, but do let me know. I'll actually try and slow down or get closer to the mic. All right? Okay, so a couple of slides just to give you an idea of what I perceive or what I do see happening in the construction industry in terms of digitalization. Now, there's a very big thing that's going on because a lot of people think about digitalization as equivalent to BIM. So the big question was, is this true? Why did we have this connotation? It's probably the way BIM and digitalization kind of got into the representation in our local market over here. BCA, which is the Building Construction Authority of Singapore, has always been encouraging people to move into this space of getting BIM, getting digital content, making it digital in that sense, in the context of that sense, for everything that we do. And because of that, there was always a very close association to say, hey, when we talk about digitization, we are talking about BIM. That notion is actually not true, okay? Now, that wasn't to blame BCA for this connotation. In fact, this kind of connotation goes way back into the 1970s, even 1960s or 1980s, that kind of thing. I'm not sure whether it's fortunate or not, but I was part of this journey that made it happen. That was in my early days of my career. And for those who've seen this diagram, you probably get very, I'm not sure, I get very nostalgic when I see these kind of pictures in there. What you see on the left is what we call, and we used to name this guy the Big Eye Monsters. It's like, that was an intergraph machine for those who are familiar with. And those are the days where you get huge digitizers on the table, you kind of overlay drawings on this kind of boards, and you kind of start drawing them over again. It's like you get these drawings and you translate it back into a digital form. And that was what this machine does. And this machine don't come cheap. So it becomes a very specialized skills that people call digitization, all right? And historically, it has moved from that and all the way to where we are today. If you look at where people started with drawing papers and pens, and you look at how the digital CAD came about in the 1980s, when AutoCAD became a very, very popular tool. And that kind of evolves all the way into the turn of the century, where people are now visualizing this in three-dimensional perspective, visual forms, and it kind of extends all to where we are today, that we say it's just beyond visual representation of what we do today. We want these kind of things to be representing content and information and stuff like that. So because of these historical patterns of how we started way back then until what we see today, we tend to have this connotation to say digitization, it's BIM. Again, I would like to stress that's not true. It's only one aspect of what we call digitization. So what else do we see in digitization? I look at it from many angles, in terms of processes, in terms of documents, in terms of communication. And what do we mean by this? Processes of how we automate, how we move content and information from one checkpoint to another checkpoint. How do we actually communicate? Like someone says, you need to perform this, or you need to rectify a problem that's on the ground. How do we register this kind of communication into a digital form? Or for that matter, when you receive a purchase order or you actually receive a delivery order, how does these documents become a digital form that can be part of a process or can be part of a communication that you are actually delivering for your projects? And all this are in relation to what we call digitization. So it's no longer just focusing on BIM and says, let's get some CAD drawings into a content-rich three-dimensional form. We are now talking about processes that you need to automate in its flow. We are talking about documents that actually comes from, delivery orders and stuff like that. And then how that actually gets embedded into the processes that influence the way you automate. We are also talking about verbal communication, translating that into an execution, into an instruction that we can actually capture and monitor the completion of an instruction. That, to me, I think are some representation of what we call digitization. It's not just about CAD, it's not just about BIM, it's about the entire thing, the entire processes, the entire deliverables, outcomes that you actually put together in any construction project, any big projects. That is actually digitization. So if we were to look at the trends of where all these things are going, and definitely we are talking a lot about technologies coming in to help us make this happen. This slide is not something I created out there. And things that you hear in the industries are what everybody's talking about in terms of using technology to help us with digitization. We're talking about drones, we're talking about laser scanners, we're talking about integrated BIM, and the list just goes on. Naturally, the use of technology is now no longer being seen as being detached from what we're doing. So whatever that we do with the construction industry, technology is now becoming taking a bigger role to fulfilling what we want to see as effective outcome for the projects. So if I were to actually look at all that, there's so much things that's happening in this industry. If I were to take some of these things and kind of track it over the long term and the short term, and what kind of things that we're likely to see happening very much in the short term space for what's happening in Singapore, I probably will actually zoom down to the following elements. Content and analytics are something that I will probably see something that's happening very soon. Robotics and automation, it's also something that's very near at where we are today. Mixed reality, and as well as the way we perform our roles, there's going to be lots and lots of expansion beyond just doing what we are familiar with. And I suppose this, when we talk about short term, we are talking probably, between the next 3 to 5 years. Anything beyond that, and because technology is moving in such a fast pace, you're likely to see a lot more things coming up in the longer term, which is almost hard to anticipate right now. So I would say, in our local context, in the short-term representation of this space, these are the kind of trends that you're probably going to see realizing it very much in our industry. And naturally, these are just my view. Anyone who adopts any of this thing, it's going to see major game changing in the way we do things. So it could be a mixture of some of these things. It could be just specific items, and you will see certain results benefiting from the projects that you guys are working on. Now, someone will probably say, hey, these things are probably very far-fetched and it's probably way longer than we think. In reality, it's actually closer than we thought. When we talk about content and analytics, these are some things that the construction industry are already utilizing. They're actually on the very high extreme, on one spectrum where this very, trend and evolve companies utilizing it to help them make decisions, appreciating projects, costing, trends, delays, and the sort of things in there. People are now using this kind of dashboard to help them influence the way we do projects. And of course, you see the little diagram on the right side is to tell you that these are all interconnected. It's no longer remaining as independent elements in the way we look at analytics, in the way we look at data. For instance, we look at labor, we look at people that's on site. These are all data that's coming in. Sensors are now going onto tower cranes, sites, and so forth to pick up information in relation to the progress of the projects. And these are realities that's already happening in Singapore. We look at actually in terms of robotics and stuff like that. Automated prefabrication factories in Singapore are already there. We are talking not just about familiar terms like DFMA, BIM-VDC, and PDU and stuff like that. We're also looking at things in relation to mechanical building services where things are becoming modularized. And so you actually assemble these modular elements in the factory, bring it to site, and do an assembly. And that's something that's already happening in the industry. Beyond that, there's a lot of talks that's going on right now in relation to 3D printed elements, modules. So you will see like the one that's on the lower right diagram where you see a 3D printed bathroom that's actually done by the local university. So instead of prefabricating a bathroom in a factory, you can now literally print a bathroom on a construction site, which means to say the 3D models and information is going to come in to complement the action of the robots in printing a unit. In places like in the United States, and I think where countries that you can't afford this kind of major infrastructure and everything, you have robots actually printing small building houses for them. So you actually do a lot of Googling, on the internet, you'll probably find a lot of this implementation happening right now and elsewhere in the world. And I don't think that's going to be very far from where we're going to be seeing locally as well in Singapore. And of course, beyond just building, creating with robots and stuff like that, we are now using robots to actually do surveillance, capturing data for the progress of the project. What you're seeing on the right side is actually a robotic dog, which is called Spot, nickname, and it's actually done by Boston Dynamics. But for those who are familiar with the Singapore context, there was one of these little robot running around one of the parks to advise people during the COVID period to keep a safe distance. It was a trial exercise. It was very interesting because I've seen people, when they saw this little robot running around, they were avoiding it because they were afraid they would crash into this little robot. Actually, this robot is a lot smarter than that. It knows that when it's in the vicinity of people, it will slow down and wait for someone to pass. But what you're seeing over here is that people are now using these robots to do as-built information. So what they do is they laser scan the entire project in the time when no one is working, or you actually have places where safety is an issue. For instance, in a oil and gas factory or space, where going in there could actually be a bit of a risk. So you actually send these little robots in to do. So I think there's going to be a lot more coming up in this space where robotics and automation is going to come in to make it happen for the construction industry. Short term, 3 to 5 years, yes, there's a lot more things that's coming up. In fact, there are already robots that's out there doing painting works, plastering, that sort of stuff. And they are all coming up very, very soon in the future. Even beyond that, we're also talking about trends in terms of mixed reality. What you're seeing at the very top is an image of what we've done with laser scanners. People are now sending laser scanners to scan the entire place. So if you actually have a space that is actually risky, or you get, materials that's too dangerous for people to get nearby, robotics can now go in and scan the entire place, and you can now make use of this in some kind of mixed reality environment to study the space before you actually go in and do something about it. Now, beyond that, now people are actually overlaying what we call digital content against actual construction. So what you're seeing over here is an overlay of augmented reality. When we talk about augmented reality, it sounds very strange, but you're going to play a lot of Pokemon. That's probably how it goes about. You kind of overlay a digital content over a real space. So what you're seeing over here is that people can now visualize what is going to be happening to a construction site as you progress into development. You're going to see this thing happening soon? Absolutely. There are already tools and software out there that's going to make it happen, make it easier for you. Now, on top of that, what is also interesting is that once projects are completed, the biggest thing over here is that you can't tell what's hidden behind what's being built. For instance, the false ceiling and so forth coming to hide M&E services, electrical conduits, and stuff like that. But with mixed reality, you can now put on some kind of goggles or even using a tablet to understand what's behind that surface before you take action to do retrofitting or to do modification, things like that. So mixed reality is going to be a bigger role that's coming in. Is it going to happen for the next 3 to 5 years? Absolutely. The question right now is to what extent you're probably going to see this happening in the industry. And I think with all this coming in, the short term is that what I've seen in the earlier slides, I kind of mentioned about content, analytics, robotics, mixed reality. It's all going to come in and say the way the engineers, the way the people on site work, the way the big guys do the job, the roles are all going to be extended with technology. You're going to be using that to complement your role and be part of the way we do things, instead of just saying that this is actually an IT guy, this is actually a big guy. It's no longer going to be that way, because I would see the way the roles that we are performing today, it's going to be a lot more than just what we do conventionally in the past. And when you actually absorb any of those things into your workflow, likely you're going to see a major change in the way you deliver your projects. And that's just something that I kind of like to share with you from my views. And I'll hand it back to Brandon and Ethan for what we're going to be talking about subsequently. All right?
Thank you so much, Edmund. Wow, that was a load of information. It was something new for me. I hope it was something that everyone else could take some learning as well. Definitely, thank you so much for sharing that. I think, Edmund, you raised out some very, very interesting points. Okay, before we even move on to the Q&A, I personally will have some questions, just to run it through you. Maybe also a little bit of information about yourself, so that at least our participants can understand a little bit about background, have a bit of context also, so that they can have a better application. Okay.
Sure.
I think one unique sort of pointer that you had, right, Edmund, was that actually you had the opportunity to sort of view the industry from different perspective. You were previously directly from BCA themselves. you also had you were working with them even after that, right? As a sort of adjunct
Yes.
lecturer, and getting a lot of insights. And I think personally, while you were with Straits, you also have a lot of connections with the developers themselves. So actually, I wanted to sort of understand from these different stakeholders in the business, in the construction industry, right? How is BIM seen as a tool, or how is digitalization seen as a whole? And I'm sure each of them have their own perspectives. And how, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more how it's different from them.
Yeah. um, I think one of the things that's happening in Singapore is that we're very fortunate. The government is very proactively supporting different stakeholders to automate, to digitize. That's actually very fortunate. Looking at how they try to roadmap and move the industry towards digitalization, that's actually something that's really connected. Unfortunately, the industry over here actually has a little bit of lag. In my view, we are not able to catch up with the pace that the government has envisaged us to be. So we are a lot slower than where we could actually go. Partly, I suppose, different stakeholders actually have absorbed it in a slightly different way. When we actually started off with the consultants, the project that's in there, they were very driven by creativity, design, analytics, and stuff like that in relation to the concept of a project. I mean, that's the only way to win a project for them. So their focus is very much into the design works, how fast can you get it done, what kind of creative elements can you actually put that. But the contractor space actually takes a little slightly different way. The design are very much fixed, and you have to find a way to deliver the project in the most effective way, the most efficient way. And of course, there are certain things that's always unforeseen, and when that happens, you need to react to the changes, and the time for you to react is always an element that will affect the timeline in completing the project. So I think we all have a slightly different way of looking at it. And of course, at the end, when the developer takes over the project, the question was, how do I maintain the project for the next couple of years? 10 years, 15 years, that sort of thing. And that becomes very gray in that sense. So when BIM kind of evolves, it was a challenge. It's interesting because when I kind of got into the BIM industry, I was actually at the infancy of how it actually got kicked off very much in Singapore. And as we progress into that, it kind of grows with the different stage of the project, with the different stakeholders coming in. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that's the right word or not, we see ourselves growing with implementation. So naturally, for some people, they are going to be lagging behind, and they probably may not appreciate the benefits of doing it right up front. So today, you will see the consultants are probably very much into this space. The contractors are probably the next people that's in there. The developers, they only started to kind of appreciate the value of it. And it's probably a journey that's going to take some time to fully got embraced by all different stakeholders in them. So because of different purpose or different objective by different stakeholders, we could not spread the use of BIM technology effectively over the entire life cycle. Right now, it's very focused in meeting each trade's, each discipline's purposes. But I think one day it's going to happen at a point where it's totally embraced by the entire stakeholders, then that's where the true value comes in. Right now, everybody is very focused on their own bottom line. What is the real focus on them? So that's how I see it happening at different stakeholders, at different journey, at different timeline, and sort of things in the industry.
Understand. I mean, really, like you said, right? They all have their own different core values as well as different sort of stakeholders they must manage and protect as well. So I think you're right. Hopefully, we can reach that sort of interconnectedness that you were talking about, and we reach that sort of midpoint where everyone comes on board.
It will take time, and it's definitely a journey that's not that you're not going to see happening overnight. It's probably going to take some time, and some people will do it a lot faster than others, but I suppose somewhere it has to begin, and we're probably on the journey right now.
True. On that note, right, I mean, since we're talking about it, this is a question that pops up in every webinar nowadays, right? With respect to COVID-19, of course, I think we all know, right? We were from the construction industry. It was very heavily impacted in 2020. 2021 remains to be seen. But how has that actually sort of impacted on a digital front or on the technological front? I think personally, right, how do you see it being potentially affected further, even actually?
Well, one of the things that we kind of take away very much from COVID-19 over here was the ability to react to changes quickly. It's how a company is going to survive. All the reason the embracing of technology to help us to be more effective becomes more imminent. In the past, we used to say, let's take our time. Let's do it at a certain pace. But if we are not ready for it, we are going to be more hit by a situation like COVID-19. One of the things that we do realize, or we kind of realized when we were actually moving into a situation where we are being partially locked down, was the reliance of technology to help us do the job a lot easier. We need to communicate, we need to talk to different suppliers, we need to talk to our colleagues to get certain things done. We need to be able to monitor the progress and situation on site. The use of technology becomes a lot stronger in that sense. Like for instance, you want to see certain things that's happening on site. You can't send a person in to see that anymore. If you actually have CCTVs that's actually kind of attached to IoTs and stuff like that, you would actually be able to track and see certain things happening on site without deploying people in that situation. Fortunately for us, when we actually got hit, we were already somewhere in between, and that didn't hit us as badly as we thought. But it still affected us because there were tools that we need to be ready for, we were not there, and we have to react very quickly. So that's why I think the roles that we are doing today no longer stays the way we were in the past. We now need to really look and say technology needs to be part of our role. Technology needs to be part of our responsibility. Only then I think when the next wave comes along or the next impact that comes along this way, we'll be ready for it and we'll be able to react. As of today, the way we look at our roles, it's still very distant. People will say, let's get the IT guys to do it. But I think that has to change. And I think for every role that we're doing in ourselves, technology needs to complement to make it happen for us.
Wonderful point that you made actually that about the IT guys, because in fact I've been seeing personally, right, as a sort of recruitment in this space, I've seen a lot of new roles that are coming up that is a mixture. I think there are a lot of new organizations that are pushing out a sort of hybrid role nowadays where they're combining engineering as well as technology with knowledge of coding even, right, to come into play into this sector and creating a digital platform in a sense, or digital direction. How do you feel about this sort of general direction? Is this something that where is it leading to? Because personally, I don't know where this will be leading to and how it will actually affect our our engineers today as well.
It will, I think, all the reason it's going to really change. One of the aspects over here that I'm thinking over here is that the education sector probably needs to react slightly differently to what's happening. The COVID-19 was a very good learning platform for many, many of us. It also actually probably needs to influence the way education looks at how it's going to be delivered, or what else needs to be changed in the way we develop our expertise. I think Yes, and there's going to be still a role where the IT guys and technology guys going to come in to bring it further. But every role needs to, every discipline or every trade that we work out there needs to understand that technology must be part of the way they do things. So I think probably education is one thing. And I think for people who've already been out of the education cycle, you probably need to get back to absorb some of this. Even as we talk about BIM today, this technology is it's constantly evolving. And we need to constantly keep ourselves abreast and ready to react to it when the changes comes along.
I see. Yeah, makes complete sense. Actually, on that note, right, because like you're saying, we because in our webinar today, we don't just have engineers, right? We actually have some of the SME business owners, some of the directors in some of the BIM industries themselves. What about from their perspective? I mean, what do they need to keep an eye out? You know, not just from an employee point of view, but maybe from an employer point of view. What do you think could be something that they should keep an eye out or look out for?
I suppose employers actually have different objectives.
Yeah, definitely, right?
Probably we will actually hear from some of the participants later on. But at least from where we play, or at least where I'm holding right now, I need to ensure that my guys no longer just pay attention to the specific role that they play in, they kind of do in day-to-day work. So they need to think beyond that. Like for instance, when we talk about BIM technology, the pool of people that I have needs to be moved or transformed to the next era, meaning to say to meet the next challenges that's likely to come along. One of the things that the industry has been talking in the BIM space is this thing called computational BIM. So computational BIM is about thinking about how you automate the way you do information, the way you do content, and the way you do beyond just the way you do building a model day in, day out. So it talks about software development, script writing, application development to automate your role so it becomes a lot more effective. And because of that, my pool of people are actually kind of encouraged to go into that space. And where possible, we will likely sponsor them for some training just to make sure they are ready for it. So I suppose there could be other purposes at different tier in terms of management, but at least from the way I look after the people in my department, this is where I'm actually putting them into, and this is how I'm actually supporting them to go to the next extended role.
I see. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you so much. I think you're right. It's about preparing about what's forward as well. Computational BIM is something that I've heard. I think based on what I've heard from you guys in the industry, at least, Rhino is something that people have been utilizing as well. I think this is one of the softwares, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it's just one aspect of things. I think there are many aspects. Some people are looking to even real hardcore kind of computational BIM. So you really go to hardcore development to utilize information with BIM technology, embrace dashboard information, or you could actually be doing very much script-based kind of development.
Okay. Well,
so Rhino is just one example.
I see. I will definitely have a lot more to learn from you, Edmund. Okay. Coming back, right? We talked a bit about impacts, right? But what do you feel about opportunities for development that might come from investing in all this, upgrading or sort of putting into technology or digitalization of our industry? I mean, what are the potential upsides? What are the kind of potential future that we can see ourselves?
Yeah, it's always a contention, because for every technology that we put in, it's money sinking.
Yes.
So I hear that a lot from my bosses as well. But I suppose we have to evaluate technology and kind of benchmark the outcomes that we're looking for at a very early stage of a project. And we work towards. So if you actually remember that slide, I kind of tell you like the different trend that I foresee happening in the industry. Realizing game-changing results from them doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to do a lot. A simple dashboard can actually help a company to be effective if you are getting the right information presented up there. And that may actually be a low-hanging fruit that someone wants to work on. Yes, it's going to cost you certain things. And I know, think about that little robot running around, that robot don't come cheap, right? But someone needs to equate that to ROI. And that is something that, you know, the management have to work closely with its pool of people that tend to actually work it out and present that as an early outcome to see whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. For some people, the size of a project may be in terms of, you know, a few $100 million. So you might actually say, for a few $100 million, I probably want to, you know, invest $500,000 of technology to see a return of $2 to $3 million. That could be one example of how we look at things. But there could be many dimensions of how we want to measure. But I guess for every investment that people want to put in, we probably need to set up what is the initial outcome that we want to achieve and work towards that. Instead of, you know, just grabbing everything on the table and let it move. BIM wasn't cheap. In fact, to get BIM into the journey of digitization, it's not cheap. But you need to find a way to realize that outcome in the most effective way. One of the biggest failure where people actually start to invest in BIM was to assume that you are investing that technology as you were to be investing it in an AutoCAD environment. That was the biggest failure. And when we actually talk about this, processes needs to transform, roles need to transform, the way we do things needs to transform to realize the outcome.
Okay, thank you for sharing. You're right? I think they really, it's about seeing the results from from an owner's point of view. If they see that as a value, they would definitely put that kind of investment into it. I think something from my own point of view that I'm quite curious, because end of the day, for me, I am working. We are connecting with a lot of talent. Right, we're working with professionals on a work basis. With all this digitalization, with all this sort of connection and technology, it comes to the age-old question: will technology replace the man itself? Will, you know, what will happen to the livelihood? I mean, what are your thoughts? Of course, it's a contentious question, I know, but I mean, just your personal opinions, lah. I mean, just wanted to share. And how, if not, then how can we grow alongside it? You know what I mean?
Okay. When I actually first visited Boston Dynamics some years ago, and looking at some of the YouTubes with Boston Dynamics, there were robots dancing to music. So the first thing I thought, would there be any, in future, would there be dancers being replaced? I kind of think about it that in the construction industry, I would say some of this automation and everything, it's not going to, at least for the next 10 years or so, it's probably not going to eliminate any role, but it's probably going to elevate the value of your role to a different dimension. For instance, you are not going to be painting the works. Let's say a robot were to do painting for you, you're probably going to get better value like that you're going to be doing more than just painting. In the past, you need a skilled laborer to actually go and paint. And every time when the painting gets done, he may not have time to go and review whatever that he has done. But the robot is always consistent in the way you do. And you're probably going to extend the role to a different position beyond just painting, creative works and stuff like that that's out there. So I think it's probably going to transform the role, but it's probably not going to remove people's, at least for the moment, right? Until the day we reach, I don't know, through automation, then maybe that something will happen. I do not think that it's going to totally replace people in the next 5 to 10 years. Kind of thing.
Okay, wonderful. Right. I mean, there has been a lot of information. It's been a very good learning journey for myself, at least. Okay, I hope the rest of the participants have learned quite a bit as well. As sort of closing note from me at least. Okay, we'll move into Q&A soon. Any tips for participants as engineers, aspiring engineers, or leaders in the industry currently, or just to hear from your perspective on how to embrace or how to sort of get into this new age of digitalization?
I suppose it's all down to the individual, the motivation, the drive to actually keep yourself evolving, improving, the kind of stuff. That's probably one of the elements that's going to make a difference in them. Maybe that's how it actually started with me from the day I started my career until where I am today. So keep yourself, find something that's going to be a driving element to actually evolve. It's not going to happen automatically. So the drive needs to come from you to actually make that. That's probably what I think it's the strongest element.
Wonderful. Okay. On that note, I think we do have some questions from the participants. I will probably leave. I'll pass the mic over to Ethan so that he can sort of shoot you the questions, and good luck. Thank you so much, Edmund.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon and Edmund, for the very educational sharing so far. So we have plenty of questions coming in. We have a very engaging participants asking very tough questions. So Edmund, be prepared. Let me talk about the first question. So Catherine from the floor actually shared this observation that she saw, right? So BIM definitely is a huge buzzword these days, and the government has been doing its part in pushing BIM in various public projects. Now, because of that, there were some companies that bring BIM specialists in just so as to fulfill the requirement, to win the project, rather than meaningfully change from within, right? What are your thoughts on how companies, what are your thoughts on moving BIM meaningfully in this kind of landscape today versus trying to just win projects?
Yeah. Okay. I hope that's not from. I suppose that's actually a user. I assume that would be a user, right? Now, when we the journey with BIM, it's not a pretty straightforward thing. That's one of the biggest failures that most people thought in the past. When I first started off with PCA, I was actually at the early stage of where PCA was trying to roll out this technology into the industry. And one of the things that I've seen that caused a lot of failure was you literally buy the software and you just get the AutoCAD guys to do the job. All right? It's not going to work. One of the things that actually works very well for companies who actually manage to embrace it was they literally sit down and literally transform the way they do things. Right? They rethink the roles of each individual. They have to rethink the way, how content, information are being built within the organization. They have to rethink the processes in there. And it's actually a very, in a way, to some extent, I would say it's a technical role. All right? So when we first started off this whole journey into the construction industry, at least for my part, was it didn't start off by saying, let's just get the AutoCAD guy to do the job. All right? Let's sit down and understand what was the processes involved. And we went back to really change the way we do things. Okay? It's no longer just the way we did in the past. So what happens over here was, a very good example was a case study that I kind of came across, and I did it for myself. The company started off with a project with 20 people creating AutoCAD drawings in there. And that was the amount of people that they had. So the question was, if we're going to move to BIM, are we going to use 20 people to do the job? All right? So we now have to go back and say, let's look at how and what they do, what are the deliverables, what the outcomes they want to get into, and restructure the way we do things. So eventually, the company only ended up with 12 BIM. But the roles have changed, the deliverables have changed, the way we do things have changed. okay? And that's how we see benefits coming in from the company who actually transform. I know it's easier said than done, but it's a journey that you probably have to go through, and it's not as simple as what we look at it. For every technology that we deploy, the way we do it may not necessarily be as simple and as straightforward. Some people engage in consultants, some people engage their own people, so they hire a person to really answer to that outcome and to make it happen for them. Beyond that, we also have another challenge that's happening out in the industry. And because of it so being fragmented in the way we do BIM, people assume that someone declares in a resume that they are capable of doing BIM, and then you get hired immediately. I think that's one of also a big failure, because you are not getting the candidate to kind of prove the credential that's in them. One of the selection that we do right now in the company is that, of course, we do have a technical person who's accountable for all these kind of things. So what we do over here is that we actually qualify the person by getting him to prove his credential seriously and with reality before the person gets hired. So if the person kind of claims that he has done something in that, how do you actually question and justify or kind of authenticate or prove that you've actually done that kind of role? That's the thing that we actually go down to questioning and evaluating. So it's to answer the question in short, there's no direct answers. Someone needs to sit down and take on this technical role and really make them accountable for the outcome that the company wants to set. And you really need to study in details how to transform the roles of each individual, how to transform the processes that actually delivers the outcome. So that's the best, I guess, I could actually advise.
And I think you put one learning from your sharing is that at the end of the day, the government is catalyzing the movement, right? Rather than through the push with the public project as a vehicle. And companies who are just trying to treat this as a band-aid, right? Bringing in talents to just win projects is not going to be a sustainable transformation.
Yeah, it's not going to, yeah.
Yeah.
So in a very strange case, like I said, in Singapore, we are quite fortunate because the government are actually supporting you, guiding you in that sense, and it's very much driven to make it happen. I suppose there are many two angles if you look at it. Well, as in the United States or elsewhere in the world, it's never driven by the authorities. It's always driven by the developers who wants it to make it happen. So someone would actually say, we incentivize you for doing it better. That could actually be one answer. That's why there was a driving factor in elsewhere in the world. In Singapore, I suppose if we do not, and I can actually share the sentiments of where the government is looking at. If they do not put some legislation to push you into the space, we probably may not have been where we are today, or may not have actually expand or improve on certain productivity we're looking at. If it doesn't work for you and you don't seem to realize the productivities that we're talking about, chances are we may not be doing the right way. And I'm not saying that it's across the board, but at least on our side, when we're actually looking at the way we do our job, if we are not seeing the results that we actually set out to do, then chances are we are not doing it right in ourselves. And we need to go back and figure out why it didn't turn out the way we want it to be. And then we're going to make some changes in the plan.
Fantastic. And that actually brings me to the next question. I mean, the government definitely has accelerated the movement of digitization, at the onset of COVID. And we also know that two biggest problems our Singapore industry, the built environment industry in Singapore is facing now today is the lack of migrant workers, as well as the repercussions from the project delays. We are very sure that these issues will be resolved at some point in time. However, with that, what does that mean? And what are some key learnings, that we should take from COVID and especially in relationship to digitization? Here's a question from Jimmy.
Okay, that's actually not an easy answer. But I could actually say I can only address what is actually being delivered as outcome to support the team that's on site. I can't answer for the representation of migrant workers, short of it, and those sort of things. But here's a very good example of what we've been trying to do. There was always a demand for what we call mock-ups. Mock-ups is like you kind of do a simple representation of a micro-scale representation of what is going to be constructed. Someone comes and look at it, they like it, get someone to actually go and refix it and redo until to a level of satisfaction. This process of physical mock-up takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, and takes a lot of people. It kind of requires additional people to do the job. So what we've been trying to do with some of the projects that we've got is to go into what we call a digital mock-up. And so in the digital mock-up, you interrogate the models until you're satisfied with the results. Then you get someone to build it up to see and appreciate the finishes and sort of things that's in there. So if you think about it, do we get some value out of the digital mock-up? Absolutely, because I kind of sort out what I want to see in its right place, in its right dimension, in its right positioning, and that doesn't require additional resources to make it happen, or rather physical people to make it happen. The only time I actually absorb them to do the job is when I give them to say, this kind of blueprint, build this physical mock-up for someone to appreciate. That's about that, all right? So in a way, I take away the repetitive execution of making changes, and so forth in the physical mock-up by throwing back to a digital mock-up. And in that way, I could have saved some resources that's in there. So in terms of the workers that we've got on site, I cannot really kind of vouch for any industry projects that's out there. One of the things that we kind of experimented was we realized that not all workers were fully utilized on site. And the question was, how do you now track whether someone is fully utilized, not utilized, overutilized, underutilized? So that is another dimension of automation, IoTs, and stuff like that we're talking about. That's a totally different story that we're trying it out. Like I said, we did a little bit of experimentation. Is it really successful? We got some answers out of it. Can we implement it across the entire project? Maybe, okay? I wouldn't say no, but there are cases that someone needs to experiment with it to understand how we can maximize resources. That's actually from my view, but it may not be true for any other projects that's being delivered that's out there.
And that leads me to the next question from Renee, right? That, you know, a lot of the things that you have shared are really quite groundbreaking and many times revolutionary. How much of that is being implemented on site today, especially for like Straits construction?
Well, in fact, a bit of everything, actually. Yeah, so like I said, when we look at this thing, it's pretty much short term. We don't want to kind of go into a really long-term representation of what is going to happen. But everything that we kind of state out there is actually, I would say, within Straits construction at infancy stage. For instance, in terms of automation and robotics, we have a subsidiary that actually produces DFMAs, PBU, and stuff like that. Are we going to go into the journey of 3D printing? Maybe, but we are evaluating that. But definitely in terms of DFMA, we are already there. In terms of mixed reality, we have already been doing things like augmented laser scannings and stuff like that. We are actually, I would say, everything that we kind of put up there is actually an early stage of implementation. To the point that we've even put in automation with IoT devices in relation to CCTVs, in relation to capturing people's motion and stuff like that. It's there. But have we implemented it full extent for all projects? I would say no. But they are all at its early stage at some point somewhere. Yeah, so it's reality, I would say.
And to push that question further, right, when would Straits construction be expected to see the return of this investment?
Yes. So usually what we do over here is that we don't do full, what we call full execution and deployment. at the very stage. So a lot of times, like I said, when we first decide to implement certain things or deploy certain technology that's in there, it needs to be, the outcome needs to be defined. And we need to put forward a kind of a proposal in that sense for management to say, this is something we can explore. And we're going to set up a pilot to try it out. If the results comes and meet the outcome that we kind of set up in the first place, then we go to the next level of implementation. That's how we kind of cushion the ROI in that sense. One of the earliest experimentation that we did was within the BIM model, could we actually identify openings in the project that would be of danger, that the safety guys need to go in and say, let's make sure there are enough barricades around all these openings in the projects. We did experimentation of a project, and the outcome was pretty positive. So the question right now is, can we do it full scale? So we have the value, kind of size it up to say to do it with full project, how much it's going to cost, how much savings are we getting, how much safety are we going to eliminate in that sense, the kind of risk in the safety aspects of things. How much trees are we eliminating? Can we be justifiable for the cost that we're spending? So if it does, then we go ahead with that. We were actually doing that until COVID kind of came in. We kind of stopped it for a while. So now, of course, with the new technology that's coming, we have to reevaluate the whole equation to see whether it makes sense to do or not. But that's what we always do. We kind of size it out into bite size, kind of define the outcome in the pilot scheme, and go ahead and perform it over a certain time before we actually go into full-scale implementation.
Fantastic. And I believe it doesn't take one person to really make this successful. It takes a whole army, right? It takes a whole village. Yeah, and it starts from top. The top has to have that vision to really be able to bring that resources, all the way down, in the whole organization. So
the management plays a part in being supportive.
Yeah, definitely. We have been focusing on that construction and design phase, right? And how BIM is adding value in that phase. How about in the operation of buildings? Like for example, from a facilities management perspective or property management perspective, is it possible to even convert CAD data to BIM data for that purpose to be able to manage that?
Yeah, I mean it's not impossible. If there are certain projects that's already out, especially government built projects, there are already projects out there that requires you to actually extend information into the BIM model so that developers can take over subsequently to do facilities management, operation management downstream. So it's already happening in the industry. But there are cases of existing projects that's already done, and there are no such content in them. So naturally, someone needs to actually rebuild all this information to be able to facilitate downstream maintenance, retrofitting, operation, and so on. Yes, it's still possible to do things like that, but you will require some time to build up the content to support the activities.
And I believe that will require, all the touch points across that value chain to be in line, right? Regardless the developers, the consultants, the contractors, in order to share data.
It's already back to the developer. The project has already completed, and there's no source for consultant and contractor. The developer will probably have to invest in building it up there. That's the thing. But if you're already in the project and it's still in execution, I think the developer have a choice to say, get the contractor or the consultant to develop that for you. Right? So it depends on when the project was being delivered or handed over to.
Okay, got it. And we spoke about, and thank you so much, Suguru, for this question. But let's zoom in out a little bit, right? We spoke about so much benefits in the integration of technology in the built environment sector, but we also do see that take-up rate has so far still been pretty slow despite COVID digitization. We are still seeing that it's increasing in its pace, but maybe not as fast as we would like to see still. What do you think are the key reasons?
I suppose the reaction came when COVID came in was how to actually now continue the business. That became a priority. So that kind of overshadowed where a lot of companies are trying to do. So we all know that when COVID kind of came in, it took the industry by surprise to a certain extent. So a lot of people are reacting to how to keep the business going, how to follow up and sort of things. And because of that, many of this investment that they put into kind of build the transformation kind of put aside, right? So that in a way sort of delays the company's objective in the first place. It could have, all right? And because of that, I think it will take some time for the industry to come back and say, let's relook at back this stage of how to do it. The ability to use technology to continue business became an overriding element that overshadowed everything that's happened. Even for us, it did the same thing, okay? But it wasn't as big as it thought it was to be. So during the time when we were locked down, we took the chance to go back and revisit some of the items that we overlooked and see how we can actually redo it better in a different way. So it wasn't wasted, but like I said, if someone was to task to look into BIM, deliverable, execution, the outcome for the company, that person needs to be accountable, think about how to continue this journey when things are ready.
Okay. And do you think that the government or the private sector can do more in further catalyzing this movement?
I definitely think there's always an angle to do it. All right, I always think that it's going to be. So it's hard to say for the private sector, but I'm pretty sure the government is still putting its effort to try and help the industry to move towards transformation, digitalization, and sort of things. I think they are still very supportive of that. So the question right now is back to the industry: are you ready to really move forward with that journey? It's not an easy answer because you need to think about your own business first, and that kind of affects to some extent what is happening on the journey.
Here's one technical question that we have from the floor as well.
Okay.
What is the biggest technical difference between BIM and VDC, and the way it's being applied?
Yeah. I think that's always been a question that has been asked. To many people, VDC is like just seeing a virtual building model and you see some kind of construction simulation going through. But in reality, that's not the case. VDC is a terminology that kind of started way in the US. And if you kind of do a bit of Googling about it, there's many representations of what VDC is supposed to be. But the Singapore government had kind of adopted a close representation of what Stanford University did for VDC. So I would believe that VDC is kind of embracing BIM, including processes and measurements of how you do over the entire life cycle of the project. With BIM, I could actually build a fantastic model. I could actually build quality data into it. But it doesn't measure how well you do your job, how well you deliver the outcome. With VDC, you now need to describe what you want to see as an outcome. You build the content, you look at your processes, and you measure against an outcome. If you're not meeting the outcome, what are you going to do to improve on that? That's actually VDC.
Wow. And is there any difference in the way this is being applied on the ground, or is more
Yes.
from a...
Yes, I think many people don't quite understand the importance of matrix in VDC equation, and many people do not look into processes in the VDC equation. So if you actually look at this thing and you were to look at it, study each of them in details, you realize it's very important, because if you don't look at the process, the way we do things, you are never going to achieve the outcome, the benefits that you're going to be investing in BIM. That's how I see VDC. So there are many angles that people are not studying in details in relation to true VDC. Many of people are now just relating VDC as virtually building a model, see something running interestingly on the screen, and that to them is VDC. But in reality, that's not the case.
I see. Okay, and you know, we also see that BIM has it's not stagnant, right? It's evolving so rapidly, including the way the software that's being used, like for example Dynamo, Rhino. I mean, from a technical question, what are they? what are the kind of applications?
Well, all these actually, they are very much script creators. Script, and it's a sense that you do something repetitively over and over again, and you don't want to do it the same way again. Just write a little script that will repeat the process for you. That's actually what we call computational BIM at one extreme. So things like Dynamo, Rhino, even Python programming, it's all related to what we call computational BIM. So every day when you perform a certain task, like you produce a drawing, you actually have to do step A, step B, step C, and so forth, repetitively over and over again. I will translate that into a script, all right? And that will automate for me in that sense. So that's what it means.
and from a implementation or practical perspective, right? Because of the involvement of language, in the implementation, does that mean that companies that is employing this technology will also have to have a system where it has to keep up with these changes?
Unfortunately, it's inevitable. It's like you have Microsoft operating system like Windows 7, Windows 10, and so forth. It will hit you one day, and I think that's why I say the roles that we are doing today, you can't detach yourself from technology. You need to be ready for it, and you need to keep yourself abreast. You can't run away from that. It's going to change. It's going to happen one day. You just got to.
And does that mean that from a service provider perspective, AEC providers who are coming in as consultants to companies who are looking to really make fundamental changes, what kind of service and value add that they should need to think about, in view of such changing trends that can move so quickly, that can make today's technology so irrelevant tomorrow?
It's hard to benchmark that kind of thing. When we talk about value adding from services that's coming in, it's hard to do that. So what I would actually look at it from another angle. If you're going to engage a service provider to make this happen for you, you've got to question how capable that person is in terms of utilizing technology to help you make it happen. For instance, if you were to engage a service provider to look at developing automation in a BIM space for you, all right? Now, if the fellow were to say, let's follow the conventional way of doing it for you, that may not be represented as value adding. I would actually say that person has to look at the process and discuss with you what's a better way of doing it. If you like it, let's do it that way. That's value adding. So if someone to come back and say, let's do the conventional way, let's do it this way, it is no different from any other companies. I don't think that's the value that I would want to see coming from the provider. Okay? But if someone comes back and says, let's study together, make it happen for you, and this is how it's best for your team to move forward, that's probably another angle I would look at evaluating those propositions.
Got it. I have a question from the floor as well, when it comes to other emerging trends like blockchain, or even, you talk about mixed reality. There we could be also looking at AR, VR, or even the use of data science, right? Where to really collect this data to be able to make great decisions. What are your thoughts on these emerging technologies?
Wow, that's a lot of things that's happening in that space. Blockchain is another thing that's actually quite a big issue that's out there. The question is, do we really need that kind of technology to make it happen? We did a bit of assessment on our own whether blockchain means something for us right now. Frankly, it didn't mean a lot of value for us. It's a fantastic tool. It's a fantastic technology where you don't really have to worry about authentication and stuff like that in relation to using blockchain technology. But by forcing ourselves to adopt that technology, will it make it more cumbersome for my application to go? That's something we question ourselves. Right? So by itself, blockchain is a fantastic tool for other purposes. Some of the things it may not make sense for what we want to do, and I don't think I will actually want to embrace it. Things like mixed reality, we also have to look at the space that we're working on. For a consultant, be able to demonstrate you being in the project virtually and appreciating that space, it means something important to the developer, to the owner of the project. But as a contractor, that may not make sense. I will probably want to see augmented reality of overlaying what I'm going to be constructing tomorrow against what I have constructed today in a mixed reality environment. That may be of more meaning to me. So it depends on the space that you're working on, and I think different technology means different things to different people. One of the things that the blockchain people are very interested in is probably the QS, okay, one aspect. But it may not mean something to a contractor who's going to be executing on the project site itself. All right. So, like I said, different technology means something to different people or different trades or different discipline. But it doesn't mean that it's hopeless, throughout. You can't blanket it across the entire built environment. Say this is going to be meaningful for everyone in that space.
Wow, that's a very good point of view. Sometimes we do have a lot of technologies and we are spoiled for choices, but the question is how relevant it is, to a specific industry, and whether there's actually more work resulting from that usage of technology, right? That's why it's very important to really understand what is the core objective, what is the end result that we like to get out of, before we really understand how best to implement those technologies. Fantastic. On that topic, right, we have a question from the floor too. What does that mean when it comes to the springing out of new industries in the built environment space? Right, we have in recent times we have built tech companies, prop tech companies, right, and well supported by hedge fund investors, private equity guys coming in, right? It's bringing a new form of industry. So, in Chinese we call it 百花齐放, right? But what does that mean, right, for the built environment industry? If you to look at it, in how it's going to look like in the next 12, 18 months, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Okay, to be honest with you, I would not be doing a lot of justice to those industries if I were to make any comments on that, because I'm not really in that space. I've heard about them, and I think it's like any investment or any things that you do beyond the built environment. It's something you probably need to observe a lot at this point in time, especially with new things that's coming along the way. The challenge that I see over here is so different from understanding what Bitcoin means to us, or Bitcoin means to us, all right? So we just have to keep looking in it, study into it. But like I said, it's going to be very unfair of me to make any judgment in the area, so I would rather not comment on that.
Okay, got it. And that was our last question. Do we have any questions? Any more questions from the floor? Okay, Brandon, do you have any further questions?
I think Edmund has had a really hard time really with the questions so far.
For the grilling. No, but
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So in that case, right, if we have no further questions, thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar with us. And thank you so much, Edmund, for taking the time to prepare the slides and coming out with the materials to be able to give us your insights. This session is on record, therefore, we will also put this on our website and on our LinkedIn page. so that if our participants, you guys need some refreshment in terms of what Emma has shared, please feel free to visit our website at www.annexion-partners.com or visit our company LinkedIn page, right? The webinar will be up in a week's time. All right. In the meantime, you can still email Brandon or myself if you have any further questions that we can direct to Edmund. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming down to this session with us. Brandon, do you have any last words?
I think nothing on my end. Thank you so much again, Edmund, for taking time out. I know you had a very busy week. I think a lot of people had everything. So like I told you before, really appreciate you taking time to sort of share all these insights, like what Ethan said. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I think.
Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you, Edmund. Thank you. And
Take
thank
care.
you, all dear participants, for the engaging session that you have given, right? Thank you so much. And we will be hosting our next webinar in June, and it will be about environmental sustainability and how that will impact the built environment sector. So stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, bye.
Bye.